Close your eyes and imagine this. The world is frozen. Ice stretches as far as you can see. The air burns your skin. The wind cuts like a knife. And night seems to last forever. This was the reality for our ancestors during the Ice Age. For them, winter wasn't a season, it was life itself. Now ask yourself, how did they survive? More importantly, how did they sleep? Today, we crawl under thick blankets, switch on heaters, and drift into comfort. But tens of thousands of years ago, cavemen had none of that. No electricity, no down pillows, no insulated houses, just caves, stones, and whatever nature gave them. And yet somehow they made it through some of the coldest winters in Earth's history. Archaeologists and scientists have spent decades piecing together this mystery. Fossil evidence, cave discoveries, and ancient tools all tell fragments of a story of humans who against all odds found warmth where there was none, a story of survival in the face of endless cold. In this video, we're going to explore that story. How cavemen slept during freezing winters. How they turned fire into more than light. It became their first blanket. How animal hides and furs became bedding, clothing, and insulation. How caves transformed from damp stone holes into warm shelters. How families and tribes pressed together, using community itself as a survival strategy. And perhaps most fascinating of all, we'll dive into a new scientific theory. Some researchers believe early humans may have slowed their bodies in ways similar to hibernation, conserving energy to outlast the harshest months. If true, this means the secret of survival was not just in their tools, but in their very biology. This isn't just a history lesson. It's a look into the resilience that defines us as humans. Their survival shaped our survival. The way they endured the cold is the reason we are here today. So join me as we step back tens of thousands of years into icy nights where every spark of fire mattered, where every fur was precious, and where sleep itself was a question of life or death. This is the forgotten story of how cavemen slept warm in the coldest winters the world has ever known. Step back tens of thousands of years into the heart of the Ice Age. Imagine endless stretches of white, frozen rivers, towering glaciers, and winds so sharp they could cut through layers of skin. For our ancestors, winter wasn't a season, it was a constant battle. The nights were long, the days dim, and warmth was more valuable than food itself. When we think of cavemen, we often imagine them with stone tools and roaring fires. But before those moments of comfort, they faced an environment so brutal that every night brought the same haunting question. Would they survive until morning? Archaeologists tell us that winters during the last ice age were unlike anything we know today. Entire regions of Europe and Asia were buried under sheets of ice. Temperatures often plummeted far below freezing, and the wind carried icy needles that pierced even the thickest hides. Food was scarce, water often frozen, and shelter limited. Now picture trying to sleep in this world, not in a modern bedroom, not even in a wooden hut, but in the open wilderness or in a damp cave where every drop of water felt like ice against your skin. Sleep wasn't simply rest, it was a test of survival. To close your eyes in such conditions meant placing your trust in the fragile warmth you had managed to gather. The cold wasn't just uncomfortable, it was deadly. Hypothermia could set in within hours. A restless night could weaken the body, leaving hunters too exhausted to find food and families too fragile to endure the next storm. For our ancestors, learning to sleep warm wasn't a luxury. It was as important as hunting, as vital as fire, as essential as breath. What makes this even more remarkable is the fact that humans weren't naturally built for the cold. Unlike bears with their thick fur or wolves with insulating coats, our bodies were exposed, vulnerable. And yet, against all odds, Cavemen found ways to transform icy nights into survivable ones. This chapter sets the stage. The Ice Age was merciless, and sleeping warm was the difference between life and death. In the chapters ahead, we'll explore the brilliant, sometimes unexpected ways cavemen kept the cold away, how they turned fire into blankets, hides into bedding, caves into natural heaters, and even their own bodies into tools of survival. If there was one discovery that completely changed the story of human survival, it was fire. For cavemen, fire was not just a tool, it was life itself. Without it, the long freezing nights of the Ice Age would have been unbearable. With it, they created the very first form of a blanket. Picture the scene. Deep inside a cave, a small group of early humans gather around a glowing fire. Sparks rise into the smoky air, and flames dance along the stone walls. The fire crackles, giving off warmth that pushes back the cold, creating a protective circle of comfort. For the first time, the icy wind outside could be ignored, if only for a few precious hours. Archaeological evidence shows that humans learned to control fire hundreds of thousands of years ago. At first, it may have been carried from natural sources, lightning strikes or volcanic eruptions. But over time, our ancestors mastered the skill of sparking it themselves, using stones, wood, and patience. This was more than an invention. It was the birth of warmth on demand. Fire gave cavemen three incredible advantages at night. First, it generated heat that allowed them to sleep without fear of freezing. Before fire, survival was nearly impossible in colder regions. With fire, new lands opened up. Families could rest more peacefully even during the harshest storms. Second, fire provided light. In the darkness of caves or forests, predators lurked everywhere. A glowing fire was not just warmth, it was a shield. Lions, wolves, and other hunters kept their distance from the strange glow and smell of smoke. Sleep became safer, less restless, and far more possible. And third, fire brought community. Humans didn't just sleep near fire. They gathered around it, told stories, shared food, and bonded. These glowing hearths created the first sense of home. When night came, the fire wasn't just practical, it was emotional. It gave comfort, belonging, and a shared sense of safety. But cavemen weren't careless with their flames. They learned tricks to keep embers alive through the night. Instead of letting fires burn out, they buried glowing coals under ash, preserving them until morning. This meant they didn't need to start from scratch every day. In a way, their fires became as constant as the beating of a heart, always alive, always ready to protect. There's even evidence that early humans designed their sleeping spots around fire. Archaeologists have found ancient hearths surrounded by ash, with areas where people likely lay down, soaking in the warmth. Imagine lying just a few feet from glowing embers, the ground beneath you heated, the air slightly warmer than the icy cave entrance. That fire was your blanket, your guard, and your comfort, all in one. When we think about it, the fire wasn't simply survival, it was the beginning of human innovation. With fire, humans no longer had to surrender to nature's cold grip. They fought back, creating warmth with their own hands. So, as you picture cavemen drifting into sleep, remember this: their blanket wasn't made of cotton or wool. It was a living, breathing flame, carefully fed and nurtured through the night. The fire was more than heat. It was humanity's first victory against the cold. Even with fire glowing through the night, cavemen knew they needed more protection. Flames could warm the air, but they couldn't fully shield a body from icy drafts or freezing ground. For that, our ancestors turned to the one resource always. Around them, the skins and furs of animals. Imagine the moment. A successful hunt ends not only with food for the tribe, but with hides carefully stripped, cleaned, and stretched. These weren't just leftovers. They were survival tools. Over time, humans discovered that animal fur worked just like nature's insulation. It trapped heat, kept out wind, and turned icy nights into something more bearable. Wrapped in thick hides, cavemen could finally sleep closer to comfort. The skins acted like primitive blankets and coats. Children were swaddled inside smaller furs, while adults used larger hides as bedding beneath them or coverings above. Layer upon layer, these natural materials created barriers against the bitter cold. But cavemen didn't stop there. Archaeologists have found bone needles dating back tens of thousands of years, proof that humans stitched hides together. This was the birth of clothing and primitive bedding. They weren't just draping skins, they were shaping them, tying them, and sewing them into useful forms. Every stitch was a step forward in the art of survival. Think about how clever that was. Without factories, without scissors, without thread, they found ways to turn raw animal hide into wearable warmth. They used bone as needles and sinew, the tough fibers inside animals, as thread. With simple tools and endless patience, they stitched together some of the earliest garments known to history. Now picture the scene. Inside a cave, a family curled up on a bed of furs, the fire glowing beside them, layers of hide stretched across their bodies. The ground may have been frozen stone, but with animal skins beneath it was softer, drier, and warmer. Above them, larger hides blocked drafts from the cave's entrance. Together, fire and furs turned caves into something closer to a primitive bedroom. What's fascinating is how universal this method became. Across the Ice Age world, whether in Europe, Asia, or beyond, humans relied on furs for insulation. Different animals offered different benefits. Thicker hides from large mammals for bedding, lighter furs for layering, softer skins for children. Nature became their tailor, and cavemen became resourceful designers. This innovation wasn't only about comfort, it was about survival strategy. A well-wrapped body lost less heat, burned fewer calories, and stood a better chance of surviving lean winters. Warmth meant energy saved. Energy saved meant more strength for hunting, gathering, and enduring. In this way, hides were as vital as food itself. If fire was humanity's first blanket, then animal skins were our first sleeping bags. They were portable, dependable, and reusable. A hunter could travel with a hide draped across his shoulders, then lay it down at night to sleep upon. In the harshest nights, families layered themselves so thoroughly in furs that their breath condensed in small clouds beneath the covers, proof of warmth preserved. So when we imagine cavemen tucked away in freezing caves, let's not picture them shivering helplessly. Picture them wrapped in nature's armor, protected by the same furs that once shielded wild animals from the cold. It was simple, it was effective, and it was a brilliant example of human ingenuity turning survival into adaptation. For most of us today, the word cave brings to mind something dark, damp, and uncomfortable. But for our ancestors, caves were not just holes in the ground. They were life-saving shelters designed by nature itself to protect against the brutal cold. Step outside into the Ice Age night. The wind howls across frozen plains, carrying icy flakes that sting the skin. But step inside a cave and immediately the world changes. The air is calmer. The stone walls block the fiercest gusts. The temperature, while still chilly, is far more stable than the deadly frost outside. Caves worked like natural heaters, not because they were warm, but because they were consistent. While the outside air might drop far below freezing, the inside of a cave often held steady at a few degrees above. That difference, small as it sounds, could mean survival. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of families living deep inside cave systems, carefully arranging their sleeping spots near hearths. In some sites, Ashes and charcoal remain as proof of fires that burned for countless nights. The closer to the back of the cave, the more sheltered from wind and weather. It was almost like choosing the coziest corner of a giant stone house. But cavemen didn't just accept caves as they were, they improved them. Large animal hides were often stretched across entrances, creating makeshift doors. These hides blocked drafts and trapped the heat from fires inside. Imagine walking into a cave glowing with firelight, hides fluttering at the entrance and the air within warmer than the frozen landscape outside. The rocky walls themselves acted as heat storage. Once fires burned for hours, the stone absorbed some of that warmth and slowly released it back into the cave. This created a natural cycle of insulation. In a way, cavemen were the first to live in climate-controlled spaces, using caves, hides, and fire to build an environment where sleep became possible. Caves also offered another kind of safety. Out in the open, predators prowled. Wolves, cave lions, and other hunters thrived in the Ice Age world. Sleeping outside meant constant danger. But inside a cave, the narrow entrance acted like a gate, and the glowing fire acted like a warning sign. Cavemen could finally close their eyes without fear of being dragged into the night. Some researchers believe cavemen arranged their living spaces strategically. The fire in the middle, the group sleeping in a circle around it, and storage areas tucked away in corners. This setup created a protective barrier, with warmth radiating toward everyone inside. In colder regions, caves became more than shelters. They became homes, passed from generation to generation. Think of them as the earliest human neighborhoods, where nights were spent not just surviving but building the foundations of community life. So, when we picture cavemen sleeping, it's not out in the snow under the stars. It's within stone walls warmed by fire, insulated by hides, and protected by nature's own architecture. Caves were more than a backdrop to human history. They were natural heaters, guardians of warmth in a frozen world. Even with fire, furs, and caves, there was still one more secret to staying warm: each other. Humans are social by nature, and in the Ice Age, this wasn't just about companionship. It was about survival. When the nights grew coldest, cavemen didn't sleep alone. They huddled, together, bodies closed, sharing warmth in the most natural way possible. If you've ever felt the comfort of sitting close to someone on a cold night, you know how powerful body heat can be. For cavemen, this was a life-saving practice. A single person might freeze, but a group pressed tightly together could conserve enough warmth to outlast even the harshest night. Archaeologists studying Ice Age shelters have found evidence of communal sleeping arrangements, large areas that appear to have been used by entire families or even small tribes. Instead of individual beds, there were wide spaces where hides and furs were laid out for many people at once. The logic was simple. The more bodies, the more heat, the better the chances of survival. Children were often placed in the center of these groups, surrounded by adults who acted like living barriers against the cold. Elders, too, were protected in this way. It was a natural system of care, where the strongest helped shield the most vulnerable. In this sense, warmth wasn't just physical, it was emotional. It was about trust, protection, and the bonds of community. Fire helped, furs insulated, and caves sheltered. But human closeness created a fourth layer of defense against winter's chill. And it wasn't random. The practice of huddling likely followed natural instincts. Even today, many animals, from penguins to wolves, rely on group warmth. Cavemen were no different. Think of the scene: the fire glowing at the center, hides spread across the stone floor, and dozens of bodies pressed together under shared coverings. Outside, the storm rages. Inside, a hum of steady breathing fills the cave. It wasn't silent fear. It was a rhythm of life, a group moving through winter nights as one. Beyond the warmth, there was also security. Sleeping together meant more, eyes and ears, even if half asleep, ready to sense danger. A predator creeping near would face not a single vulnerable human, but an alert group, armed with fire and weapons close at hand. Togetherness didn't just keep cavemen warm, it kept them safe, but there was something even deeper at play. These shared nights around fires, pressed shoulder to shoulder, shaped the roots of human culture. They created space for stories to be told, for songs to be sung, for knowledge to be passed down. In those close circles, humans weren't just surviving, they were becoming human. So when we think of cavemen surviving winter, we mustn't only imagine fire and furs. We must also imagine the warmth of togetherness, the glow of community, and the unspoken truth that survival was never an individual task. It was a shared one. In the end, the greatest heater our ancestors had wasn't fire or hides. It was each other. Fire, furs, caves, and community were powerful tools. But even these might not fully explain how early humans endured the most brutal Ice Age winters. Scientists now believe there may have been another, hidden secret: our very biology. Some researchers suggest that our ancestors may have slowed their bodies down in ways similar to hibernating animals. It sounds almost unbelievable. Humans hibernating. Yet evidence hints that this could have been part of the survival story. Let's begin with the challenge. The Ice Age was not just cold, it was relentless. Food was scarce, storms lasted weeks, and sunlight was limited. Even with fire and hides, keeping warm required energy. And energy came from food. But when food was short, how did humans avoid freezing or starving? This is where biology steps in. In Spain, scientists studying ancient human fossils from a site called Cima de los Huesos discovered something unusual. The bones showed signs of seasonal growth interruptions, patterns similar to those found in hibernating mammals. In animals that hibernate, bone growth slows or stops during long periods of low activity in winter. These fossilized bones hinted that early humans may have experienced something similar. Imagine this. During the harshest months, cavemen may have entered a semi-hibernation state. Their bodies slowed down, conserving energy. They may have slept longer, moved less, and burned fewer calories, giving them a better chance of making it through periods of extreme cold and hunger. If true, this changes the way we think about human survival. We're used to imagining cavemen as constantly active, hunting, gathering, fighting for every meal. But perhaps, in the dead of winter, survival also meant stillness. Conserving warmth, conserving energy, conserving life itself. We can see parallels in the animal kingdom. Bears curl up in dens, slowing their heartbeat and metabolism for months. Hedgehogs, bats, and ground squirrels all enter states of torpor, short or long-term hibernation. Could early humans have borrowed this trick from nature hidden deep within our biology? Even today, traces of this ability may linger. In modern medicine, scientists have discovered that humans can enter states of induced hypothermia, slowing the body to preserve life during surgery or trauma. Certain populations living in extreme climates, such as the Arctic, also show adaptations that help them endure cold more efficiently. Perhaps our Ice Age ancestors were even more capable of such survival shifts. Of course, not every scientist agrees. The theory of human hibernation remains debated. Some argue that our bodies were never fully capable of it. Others believe the evidence, though subtle, is too compelling to ignore. But whether full hibernation or simply extended rest and reduced activity, one thing is clear. Our ancestors adapted in extraordinary ways. Picture it: a winter cave, fire, glowing faintly, hides layered thick, families pressed close. But instead of bustling with constant movement, the group moves slowly. They sleep longer hours, They conserve their energy, waiting out storms that rage for days. Their survival isn't only about fighting the cold, it's about surrendering to it, letting the body do its quiet work of preservation. This possibility adds a whole new dimension to the story of how cavemen slept warm. They may not only have used fire, furs, and caves, they may also have turned inward, relying on biology itself to carry them through the worst of winters. And perhaps this is the most remarkable part of all. Cavemen weren't superheroes. They were fragile, like us. Yet they adapted, combining external tools with internal strategies. They survived not because the world was easy, but because they found ways, both physical and biological, to make it through. So when we imagine those nights in the Ice Age, we can see the glow of fire, the layers of fur, the safety of caves, the closeness of community. But we might also imagine a stillness, long, deep sleep, bodies slowing, conserving energy, waiting for the storm to pass. It wasn't just survival. It was adaptation at the deepest level. Human beings have always been more than survivors. We are inventors. Even in the harshest Ice Age winters, cavemen weren't just relying on nature. They were finding clever ways to bend it to their advantage. Beyond fire, furs, caves, and community, they used simple but effective tricks to trap heat and make their nights warmer. One of the most practical methods was building barriers. Archaeologists believe that early humans arranged rocks, branches, and hides around their sleeping spots to block cold air. Think of it like a primitive wall or windbreaker. Even a small barrier could reduce drafts, helping the heat from fire and body warmth stay inside their sleeping circle. Another method was ground insulation. Sleeping directly on bare stone or frozen earth was dangerous because the cold would seep into the body. To solve this, cavemen laid down layers of straw, leaves, moss, or animal hides beneath them. These layers acted as primitive mattresses, lifting their bodies away from the icy ground. The difference could mean the line between freezing and comfort. In colder regions, humans may have even built pit shelters, shallow holes dug into the earth, lined with natural materials, and sometimes covered with branches or hides. The ground itself provided insulation, while the coverings trapped heat. Some of these shelters acted like early sleeping bags, wrapping individuals or small groups in a cocoon of warmth. Evidence also suggests that humans used animal fat and oils to waterproof and insulate hides. By rubbing fat into fur or leather, they created coverings that resisted moisture and blocked wind more effectively. Imagine lying in a cave on a stormy night. Without waterproofing, hides might grow damp and lose their insulation. With fat treatment, they stayed useful, keeping warmth locked in. And then there's the use of architecture within caves. At sites across Europe, scientists have found signs of stone arrangements and stacked walls inside larger caves. These may have been built to section off warmer areas, reduce drafts, and concentrate heat around the fire. In other words, cavemen were redesigning their environments, turning vast stone chambers into manageable, heat-saving shelters. It's important to realize that none of these tricks required advanced tools or modern knowledge. They came from observation and instinct. Watch how snow piles insulate the ground. See how animals burrow to stay warm. Notice how a hide blocks the wind. Piece by piece, humans borrowed from nature and improved upon it. So the next time you zip up a sleeping bag, switch on a heater, or lay down on a soft mattress, remember, those comforts are the polished descendants of simple, ingenious tricks our ancestors used thousands of years ago. Cavemen may not have had technology, but they had creativity, and that creativity kept them alive. In the end, their warmth came not only from fire and furs, but from invention itself. Ingenuity was the ultimate survival tool. and it turned freezing caves into places where sleep was not just possible, but secure. When we look back at cavemen huddled in icy caves, wrapped in furs and surrounded by firelight, it's tempting to see their world as distant and primitive. But if we pause for a moment, their strategies for surviving the cold still carry lessons for us today. First, there's the lesson of simplicity. Cavemen didn't have heaters, electric blankets, or insulated homes. Yet they found warmth in the basics: fire, hides, and natural insulation. In our modern lives, where comfort often comes from technology, we can sometimes forget how powerful simple solutions can be. Something as small as blocking drafts, layering clothes, or sleeping close together can make an enormous difference. Second, there's the lesson of community. Cavemen survived winters not by isolating, but by gathering. Families pressed close. Tribes shared resources, and warmth was multiplied through togetherness. Today, loneliness is one of the coldest conditions many people face, not in body, but in spirit. Their survival reminds us that human connection is not just emotional, it's deeply practical. Together we are stronger and warmer. Third, there's the lesson of adaptability. Our ancestors didn't just endure the cold, they adapted to it. They learned to use every resource around them: animal fat, caves, stones, and plants. Instead of fighting nature, they worked with it. In our own time, as we face new challenges, whether it's climate change, energy shortages, or unexpected hardships, the ability to adapt creatively is just as essential as it was back then. Fourth, there's the lesson of respect for nature. Cavemen paid close attention to their surroundings. They watched how animals stayed warm, how snow insulated the ground, how wind moved through caves. Their survival depended on observing, respecting, and learning from the natural world. Today, in a world of concrete and technology, we sometimes lose that connection. But perhaps the key to future survival still lies in looking carefully at what nature can teach us. And finally, there's the lesson of resilience. Every freezing night they endured was a test. Every storm they survived was proof of human determination. We are here today, living, breathing, thriving, because they didn't give up. Their story is not just history, it's a reminder that resilience is part of our DNA. When life feels overwhelming, when challenges seem too heavy, we can remember that our ancestors faced the Ice Age armed with nothing but fire, hides, and each other. If they could survive that, what can't we survive? So the story of how cavemen slept warm is more than history. It's a mirror showing us what it means to be human: resourceful, adaptable, resilient, and above all, connected. For cavemen, the Ice Age night was more than darkness. It was a test of everything they had. When the fire dimmed, when the winds howled, and when the cave grew colder with every hour, they faced the same question. Could they endure until dawn? And yet they did. Night after night, winter after winter, generation after generation. They found warmth in fire, in hides, in caves, in each other. They built barriers against the cold, learned to insulate the ground, and may even have slowed their own bodies in ways we are only beginning to understand. Survival was never easy, but through ingenuity and resilience, they made it possible. Their story is not just about the past, it is about us. We are the descendants of those who huddled together in freezing darkness, who pressed close to loved ones, who trusted firelight to keep away the cold. The strength that carried them through the Ice Age is the same strength that lives in us today. When we complain about the chill of winter or reach for the thermostat, it's worth remembering. Our ancestors had no switch to flip, no blankets filled with feathers, no homes sealed with glass and steel. They survived with the raw tools of nature and the brilliance of human invention. Every warm bed we sleep in, Today is built on the survival lessons they wrote with their lives. So the next time you slip under your covers, safe and warm, think back to those nights in the caves. Think of the glow of firelight flickering on stone walls. Think of hides pulled tight, of children nestled close, of storms raging just outside. And remember, the warmth we enjoy now is not only comfort, it is inheritance. The Ice Age could have ended humanity. Instead, it shaped us. It tested our limits, forged our resilience, and proved that even in the harshest of nights, humans could find light. And maybe that's the greatest lesson of all. No matter how dark, how cold, or how endless, the night may seem, there is always a way forward. Our ancestors found it in the Ice Age, and so can we.